Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming, particularly those who brought show and tell items. I think the rest of you are going to have a really good time seeing what our members brought. And first up, I would like to introduce a young lady whose name is Heidi. Heidi, would you please come up and show us what you brought? Please tell us, the audience, who you are and what you brought.
Okay.
Please speak into the microphone.
I am Heidi, and I brought my dog, and I got it for my birthday.
Would you put it up on the table, please, Heidi, so everyone can see it?
And push-ups. He can do a bunch of other stuff, but sometimes he only does push-ups.
Barge?
You chasing his tail, or?
That's a great use of radio frequencies.
Thank you, Heidi. Okay, I'm going to roll through the presenters here. All of you, please keep your talks to 5 minutes or less so we can get everybody in. Also, I would ask the audience to please hold your questions until this is all over. Then the presenters are fair game after we're done. So thank you, Andrew. First presenter, I think that's going to be Don.
Thank you. This was intended to demonstrate the generation of 400 hertz power. Oh, Don Nichols, KV4PH, and my XYL Dolores, who was out of the room during the initial announcements. Anyway, this thing was supposed to demonstrate the generation of 400 hertz power to operate an aircraft instrument. It was fairly heavy, so I loaded it into the car yesterday. It spent last night in the car, and the function generator that's supposed to produce the 400 hertz at a low voltage is a non-function generator at the moment. So I will simply have to tell you, okay, this two auto transformers to take the output from the power amplifier here and boost one of it up to 115 volts and take another line down to 26 volts. This wants 115 volts. These synchros want 26 volts. If it worked, as it should, as I turn these knobs, the ball will roll left and right, pitch up and down, and rotate to show the compass direction. As it is, I should have finished this, a homebrew function generator specific to 400 hertz that was going to be on the back of this panel, but it isn't yet. And so I'm stuck. We have a non-functional thing. So it's who's next in the line?
Nothing but static, just play.
Well, good evening, Howard Benton, K0LKD. And in contrast to Don's thing, I have a little ammo can style go box. It's got a 3-band UHF, VHF, 2 meter, 220, 440, and everything neatly fits into the box. And I have a, I think a 6 or 9 amp hour biennial battery. And all I have to do is open it up, set it up, plug in the magmat antenna or any other antenna you want to use for it, and it's really kind of handy and a neat little box. It's both a BTEC 3-band. Actually, it's got 4 bands. One of them's a business band, but it's a 3-band 25-watt transceiver. So that's it. Who's next?
Who's our next presenter, please? Looks like it might be Lee. No? Okay. All right, Pete. Well, thanks. All right. Well, here you are, sir. Thank you.
Pete, K6BFA. And in contrast to the machine on the end, I have here a transmitter, and it puts out 150 milliwatts. And it's a Q, if Ray Johnson were here, he'd say life is too short for QRP. This is actually called a QRSS, and QRS means send slower, and QRSS means send even slower. And this is a very slow machine, 150 milliwatts, and I've contacted Sweden and New Mexico with it. However, it's not instantaneous. That's what the extra S is there. Pardon me?
You use disconnected now?
No, I just use, it just is regular. Yeah. This is a picture of the screen, and on through there, you can barely see it, but there are some little white marks on there. I have to thank Bob Ballas for that because I couldn't see them, and he and I were staying up late one night, and he says, I see them, and I said, I don't see them, and you're spoofing me. And so anyway, we worked that out, and I can actually see them now. And there, where those 2 arrows are pointing, this is the screen with the very small, very light signal, and you can see a whole lot of noise that's on there. Part of this, the receiver, what it does is you take, get this here. Part of the receiver will take and put a filter on it, and you can see that the signal we're trying to copy, which is at the end of that arrow there, that signal is still the same strength. However, with the filter, we have actually blocked off a lot of the noise. We can put another filter on there, even more so, and you can see what's left is just the very tiniest little mark. Now the signal to noise ratio is quite changed from what it was when we first started. And so we have the same strength signal, but we've eliminated most of the noise. And because it goes so slow, the receiver then is sampling the noise, and if the noise is random, when the receiver comes back and it looks for that piece of noise, if it's not there, it forgets that it was ever there. It'll come back to the signal, and every time it comes back and does the scan looking for signals, the signal that is still there is the one that it recognizes, and it then records it. And so at the end of an extended period of time, which there's my call sign. It took 5.5 minutes to send that call, to send that call sign. But that's what the S is, send very slowly, so that you can actually experiment. What good is it? It's a lot of fun. You can build the equipment. Then it's low wattage, and so that you don't have a real problem with it. And you can also check your antenna. Actually, it's really a real good antenna checker, because the antenna will either send the signal out quite nicely or it won't. 5.5 minutes for my call sign. That's about the normal CW speed anyway. So then when you look at it later on, the panel on the front was purchased online. It's a custom-made panel. I took the data sheets from all the different pieces of instrument that you see on the front and put those dimensions into a CAD program that was online, and then I put my credit card in, and a week later out popped this cover sheet, and it's fit perfectly. So two things here, QRSS, and then also if you're making a piece of equipment, you can make it look really nice with the CAD program. Mike?
Very nice, Pete. Very nice. Up to your usual standard of excellence in making things like this. Okay, we have another presentation coming up. Don't know whose this is. This is, I guess, this is our audio system. Yes, really a champion piece of equipment there. Looks like W7ZWN. Leo, are you here? All right, Leo. Leo is a regular on our 10-meter net. Well, you know, we have it every week. And that goes for the rest of you. If you'd like to join us on 10 meters, it's just boring, but it is kind of fun.
It's so great to see the faces behind that voice. Hi, I'm Frank or Leo, either one works. I like Leo for CW work. It's a shorter call. What I brought tonight is something which attracted me originally and made ham radio a little more fun, and that's the receipt of QSL cards. And I have a few amassed over the years. I haven't been on the air much at all since I retired, which was 10 years ago, but I'm getting back into it now. There's so many new things, and I hope QSL cards are still important to people. I have a group of them here in a book, just if you want to look through it. Some of them are rare, some of them are pretty, you know. So, and I also, in order to communicate with my mother, who at the time had Alzheimer's and it was more and more difficult to work with her, I decided to get a stamp collection going. And one of the ones that I liked a lot was dedicated to ham radio, or to radio in general, so you'd have all of the famous names on the various stamps. So you see a few stamps in there. I don't know, do people collect stamps anymore? Is that, one wonders. Ah, there's a few, yeah.
How many collect stamps? Count me one.
Well, that's great, yeah. Because I remember when I was a kid, that was a big deal. I mean, you had a thick stamp book that you had to fill, and God knows what they'd be worth now. Anyway, that's the extent of my my show and tell, and I hope you enjoy looking at some of the stamps and QSL cards.
Thank you, Leo. Leo's got a nice binder up here, and looks like there's some really beautiful cards in there. So please, after this is over, come up and take a look. And that goes for all of these things. I'm sure that the presenters would love to have you come up and look and ask questions. Next, we have a real nice project up here. This looks like it's Ron's. Thank you for coming, Ron, and thanks for bringing this.
Yeah, I'm Ron Payne, and I brought along same thing I had about 5 years ago. These are clandestine receivers, clandestine transmitters. This is the RS6 system, built in 1953 by GTE Corporation. And what happened to this set right here is kind of unique. This set that I have in front of me was buried under the Berlin Wall in 1958. We had quite a few packages in those days buried under what we thought was going to become East Germany, and it did. These were for stay-behind agents that would, if all hell broke loose, they could dig them up. Inside the cache was radio equipment, signal plans, Sten machine gun, and gold sovereigns. I didn't get to keep the Sten machine gun or the gold sovereigns when we dug these up in 1993. I took these into the hotel room, turned them on, and they worked. And they still work today very well. They're vacuum tube. And I did want to show everybody, you got to come up here and see that little telegraph key off the bottom. They cover up to 15 megs, and they're about 8 watts, have a 2E26 final tube in them. Comes with a schematic diagram on plastic, which says restricted on it. The headphones have the Fonstocks on the end. I know you all remember those. And comes with a dipole antenna. This is a special wire that we had in the agency that you can strip with your teeth very easily. Just very nice wire to make an antenna out of with the ground clip, and it did come with a little bag of insulators and, of course, battery cable. The other item is what I received when I retired. This is the RR49 receiver, which was built by Motorola for us in 1962 for Vietnam. And I trained quite a few people on this, kind of people that you drop behind lines in Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. And it's a wonderful little receiver. Runs on a 9-volt battery. The battery comes with a solar charger. And notice the little earphone there. This receiver works like $1 million. And for you electronic guys, I brought the schematic of it. It is solid state, bipolar transistors. It works very well. So after this, I'd like to have everybody come up and check this out. This came in bags, and you'll notice the smell. And it's the smell of a preservative that we put on everything in those days. And it's kind of funny. This was buried from 1958 to 1993. We dug it up, and it works perfect. So nice to be sealed. Thank you.
Wow, who could beat that? Well, let's see. We have some old stuff here that belongs to
another old guy. I'm Frank, W3WAG. I thought I'd show you a progression of keys that I've used over the years, over a lot of years. I started off with a straight key, a J38, straight key. But then my father made me a side swiper. And I bet a lot of people don't know what a side swiper is. But it's like the controller for a keyer today, except that you just alternate it side to side. So like SOS would be said dit 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 dot 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 dit dit dit. You just go back and forth. You don't use all the dots on one side and all the dashes on the other. It's a terrible fist if you listen to it, but it does have the advantage of it's a lot easier on your wrist than a straight key. So I used this for a while. Then I did invest in a Bug, and the only reason I brought it is because it's not a Vibraplex. It's a knockoff of a Vibraplex, and it looks just about like a crude Vibraplex made by Electric Specialty Company. And then finally, I graduated to a keyer, made one with a couple of Success N7s or something. And so that's the progression through time. And this started in about 1950 when I first was licensed. Finally, I have a couple of these old tubes, transmitting tubes, and they're VT4Cs. And the reason they're kind of neat to look at is it's big, so you can see everything. I mean, the grid isn't quite as coarse as chicken wire, but it's not far from it. And the cool thing to me is that the plate is milled graphite. It's about a 1/16 of an inch thick, but it's graphite. It's rated at 75 watts plate dissipation, and that's continuous commercial service. They also made a tube like this and it's a triode, and so you can see just the one grid. They also made it with plate metal for the plate, and not rather than carbon. And I thought this was a rarity, but I went online this week, and it turns out there's website after website talking about this tube, because the audio guys have gotten a hold of this and are using it for hi-fi amplifiers. You know, the idea that tube amplifiers are far better. And so help me, I read a discussion online of people using a pair of these push-pull, and they were discussing whether the tube model that had a graphite plate sounded better than the tube that had sheet metal for the plate. And I didn't make that up. But anyway, it's nice to look at, because you know everything is big, and so you can see all the parts. So it'll be up here, you can look at it. That's it.
Thank you, Frank. That's the same group that thinks gold-plated power cords sound better too. Okay, thanks. Next up, I think this is Lee's. This little beauty looks homemade, but really quite professional. As everybody knows, Lee is one of our premier engineers in the club. So, please.
Okay, so real quick, why do tubes sound better than solid state amps? Anybody know why? Because their distortion sounds better. That's true. Transistor amplifiers have a lot of odd order harmonic distortion. It's harsh on your ears. Tubes sound nice and warm because they have lots of even order distortion. So everybody says they sound better, it's because the distortion sounds better. So that's a fact, to take home. So I have a couple of projects on their way. One of them's halfway up a tree right now, which is a delta loop for 40 meters. That's too big to bring in, of course. It's 32 feet long. I was working on another little project, but I didn't get very far with my metalworking, and that's a TAC 40, which is a little 40-meter CW that was featured in QST a few years ago. Somehow I got a pair of boards for it, and I threw the parts together, and anyway, so that's not ready to show. So what I brought in today is a kickback to the past, and this is based on a QEX article. This is a super regen receiver. So it's, kind of like the old style with a little plug-in coil in the back. And basically this is a modern version. It has two JFETs up in the front end. One is the RF amp, and the other is the regen detector. And then it's designed to drive a little low distortion audio output amplifier, and then that can go on to another amplifier of speakers. So anyway, that's so I put this together a few years ago and was playing around with it. So it part of it was to get the kind of nostalgia, go back to the basics of radio, use a super region and build a little transmitter to go with it, and have some fun on the air. So so that's the little project I brought in. So it looks like we have somebody's spud gun here next to me.
Thank you, Lee. That was Lee Gerlach, KD4RE, and he is also a regular on our powwow net.
Hi, good evening. I'm Leon, NT8B, and this is kind of my latest building project. It's a spud gun that I actually came across this last summer. I was visiting a friend who had some antennas way up in the trees, and I asked him, how'd you get the ropes way up there? And he pulled out a cannon that looked like this. And the thing that was really interesting to me about it is that he was able to launch tennis balls up over the tree. And for those of you who have used slingshots, with these tiny little pea-sized lead weights, I could never find them after I launch them over a tree. And the other benefit of this thing, apparently, is that it'll shoot a tennis ball 100 feet in the air. So we'll see if that's true whenever it's all done. And this actually is a kit that I got. I went online and did some research and found a guy out in California. His name is Alan Bioka, and he sells these things. And I think it's a nice little kit. He includes in it all of the PVC pipe and the valve and the lawn sprinkler valve, and the hole was drilled in the sprinkler valve, and the metal release here was included. He included a pressure gauge, and then the attachment for the Schrader valve, to attach just a hand pump to pump it up, and in case I get too exuberant, it's got a safety blow valve on it as well. So he recommends pressurizing this thing to about 80 pounds. And then the trick to this thing is that, well, I need 3 hands. The trick to this is, if you could just hold it, or you can hold that. So the trick to this is that this is a 2.5-inch piece of PVC, but instead of being sort of standard Schedule 40 PVC 2.5-inch pipe, it's called SD21. And the thing that's nice about it is that the diameter is just so that it'll fit a tennis ball really nicely. And it goes in there, and then he even provides a little plunger to push it in. So anyway, I've tested the pressure chamber, and it works quite well, but I haven't yet launched a ball. So I'll let you know how that goes. So question in the back?
Well, I tell you what, Mike just reminds me, I'll address your
questions afterwards, okay? All right, so that's the story. Thanks.
Thanks, Leon. That reminds me of the muzzle-loading cannon on my first ship.
How many survived that?
And speaking of old sailors.
Dennis, W4ZOR. I'm not very comfortable using a microphone for some reason. Give me a key. Let me get a key. But anyway, I brought in a couple of ARC 5s, recent buys from the local swap meets, one up in Maryland, and 2 of them in Maryland, one from Frederick and the other one up in Howard County up there. But this is like when my entry level drug into radio as a kid. I was 13, 14 years old in the 70s. And you can get these for $5 off a mail order catalog from Fair Radio Sales in Lima, Ohio. They're still around. They got a lot of interesting stuff in there, but the prices are quite a bit higher. But the beauty of these radios were right after World War II, there was just literally millions of these things available. These were in like every transport aircraft, B-17s, B-24s. If you go over to the Air and Space Museum, there's a front end of an A-24 in there, attack bomber, and they have the whole installation. These are just the transmitters. They're by band. This one here is the 40-meter one, and this one's also a 40-meter one. But they came in different ranges, and this one was ready to go right on the ham bands. With the coverage, and this one was above the ham bands, and my Elmer W2WAS long silent key helped me tweak it so we could get it down into the novice bands. And really interesting construction. You could really see the beauty of the work back in the 40s, the ladies in the factories putting these things together. And I highly recommend you get one, even if you never want to use one, but they're real nice. The difference between these, this is a beautiful black crinkle finish on it. It was for the Navy. And this was Army Air Corps, go Navy. And the Navy was always concerned with corrosion, you know, being in a salt air environment. So that's why they had the heavy finish. The Army Air Corps versions were left plain metal because they were on long-distance bombing missions and whatnot, so every ounce counted when they put those bombers in the air. But anyway, just take a peek at it. This one, for $2, you know, it didn't come with the cover, but you could see it's pretty much original, hasn't been taken apart and changed. So it's just a thing of beauty, in my opinion. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I think I have a couple of those squirreled away somewhere, too. All right. Ahoy, Scott.
Thank you, sir. I'm Scott, KD4EBL, and what we have here is a Code Talker radio, Navy, and this was used in World War II. This is it uses a whole half a watt, so 500 milliwatts. We can blow away the socks on Pete's down there. And this was in one of our Silent Keys estates, and he donated it to the club. A couple of things on this. It weighs, with the batteries, 37.5 pounds. It's in a knapsack. You would strap it on your back. You can do either CW or phone. And the antenna is 9 feet tall. So they would land on the beach, become an instant target, because everybody could see where that would go. This particular one, it was really three things I wanted to tell you about tonight. This radio, which is really a piece of history. If you looked at the Navajo Code Talkers, you'll see these radios. This is also, if you're into boat anchors or collections, this is a museum quality piece. According to Mike, it's never been used before. So it has not only the radio, and you can pop up here. There's 154 stations over 4 bands, going from 28 megahertz up to 80. And it has the canvas bag, has the antenna, has everything here but the batteries. So it's pretty cool. The other thing is, I'm also in charge of the Silent Key estates as they come in for the club. So we have had 3 estates and a couple of donations from people that are still living. And this is the type of things that when people have donated to the club, then we'll take these to Winterfest or decide what to do with them. In this case, you may want to look at a museum, actually. This is that good. And we have the headset and everything else here. So that's it. Please come and look.
Thank you, Scott. I had a chance to look at this radio when Byron was still living. And it is a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. Please do come up and take a look yourselves. All right, we have, looks like a navigation instrument here for the next presenter.
It seems like there's a few nautical people here, Navy. So
yes, sir.
That's my name is Dale. I'm a KJ4 VTS, and what I brought is a 1929 C-Plath sextant that I found in a antique shop in St. Michael's a few years ago, and I've simply refurbished it, and that's why it's looks shiny and usable. It was actually quite usable when I bought it, and I could on site with it and find out where you are. The sextants are very high precision, expensive instruments for telling you where you're not 150 nautical miles from. And does that work better? So if you'd like to take a look at this, it's I spent probably a year refurbishing it, taking it apart, and stripping off the old paint and the rust, and then repainting it. What does this have to do with wireless radio? Not very much. By the way, with a sextant and a nautical almanac and a chronometer, your watch, you can find out where you are if you know how to use this stuff and do the sight reductions and everything. If you can see the stars, there's an excellent book called Longitude, written by Davis Sobel a few years ago. There's also a movie with Jeremy Irons, I believe. It's a wonderful book. It explains why the importance of a chronometer, an accurate clock for nautical navigation. There's another book called Longitude by Wire, Finding North America. I didn't know North America was lost, but they in June 1844, just 2 weeks after Morse's first exchange of telegraph messages between Washington and Baltimore, Wilkes, a very famous guy that no one knows anything about, adjusted a chronometer to local time using astronomical observations and installed it at the Washington Telegraph Office. And Lieutenant Henry Eld, a veteran of exploring expedition, did the same in Baltimore. And for 3 days, the officers at each end of the line took turns sending pulses every 10 seconds in time with the beat of their chronometers. The differences in time between the two stations were averaged to give the longitude, and Wilkes reckoned that the capital in Washington was 1 minute 34 seconds of time west of Battle Monument Square in Baltimore. So just 2 weeks after the first telegraph signal from Morse to his Confederate Alfred Vail, they determined accurately where the longitude running through the capital was. And that's why, and they needed to do that because they had to find North America. There's a picture here of the sextant before it was refurbished, and a picture of the Naval Observatory, which was one of the 4 meridians used running through Washington. And there's still a meridian on 24th and H Streets downtown in Foggy Bottom, across the street from the State Department, which you can see. It's on the sidewalk. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, that's great. I've never seen one look that good. The ones on my ships didn't look that good. Had a lot of people trying to use them, including me. Anyway, who do we have next? Yours.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Don Taylor, KM4UDX, and I have here the most exotic, extraordinary, complex cell phone charger in the world. Why? Because if you follow the cord down, it's hooked up to an 80 to 10 meter transceiver called a UBIX. And in between it and the UBIX is a small single board computer called an Atomic Pi. So this is really a condo of a radio on the bottom and a dedicated embedded computer on the top with a bunch of ancillary power supplies, sources, switches, fuses, and so on. So since we have a radio, let's use it. Let's prove that this UBIX's humble $140 David fighting the Goliaths can actually do some good. So on the screen here, we are receiving now, as we speak, FT8. And you can see all of the decodes, and that's coming from this very exotic, extraordinary, and sophisticated antenna. So it's got a very good receiver, and that's why it works so well. So that's it. Oh, I do have one other thing. If anybody wants to play with this new hot little toy called a Nano VNA, It's a $50 replacement for your complex MFJ antenna tuner. I have one here. Feel free to look at it. If you want to figure out how it works, go talk to Dean, because Dean calibrated mine and he knows how to use this thing and I don't.
That's fantastic. Okay, thanks. Next up will be, let's see, this device. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Owen Christensen, KX4OY. I design and build superconducting magnets. I was at a conference a couple of years ago presenting some work we did for the Navy. And this guy from the Air Force comes up to me and he says, can I build a superconducting railgun? Well, there's only one answer to that. Yes, I can. Of course, once I got home, I said, I better go and throw something together to make sure I can do that. And that's what I did here. I just threw some components together to make a little railgun. It's an e-gun. For those history people, it was first invented or designed by a Norwegian in, I think, about 1905. Just a minute, Heidi. So what we're going to do is we're going to shoot it and show you what happens here. It consists of a full wave rectifier, a couple of capacitors, a thyristor, and a little coil. And what happens is we've got a projectile, which is mild steel, slightly ferromagnetic. And there's probably about, I want to say, a joule stored energy. The velocity is on the order of 10 feet per second, so it's really slow. But the idea and the efficiency is actually pretty good for these e-guns, about 5%. So I'm going to show you this, and Heidi's going to help fire.
Anybody on the other side of the wall?
Oh, no, not that one. Just kidding. I just loaded it. Start charging. Go ahead, flip it up. Just wait. So I have a little volt indicator here and visual, some Zener diodes. And when it gets above 20, oops.
When it gets above 20, you can shoot it.
Are you ready? So if any of you are interested in physics, going back to your physics days, it's easy to calculate the force. It's easy to calculate the magnetic field produced by a coil. And we know we can do that very accurately. We can also calculate the force on a wire with the electrons. We can calculate the force on charged particles. But have you ever calculated the force on a magnet from a wire or another magnet? It's not easy, because what happens is that ferromagnetic projectile changes the magnetic field. So you can't start with a magnetic field and do the calculation. What you end up doing is you take the energy of a homogeneous magnetic field without the projectile, and then you take the projectile and look at the change in the energy in the magnetic field in different positions, and from that you can calculate the force on a projectile. So it's not easy. Anyway, it's kind of a fun little toy.
Thanks, that's great. The Office of Naval Research will be over to talk to you tomorrow, I'm sure. They've spent millions on their railgun. Okay, next.
Hello there, I'm Dean, KK4DAS. So I don't have anything quite as cool as a magnetic railgun. I don't know, that's kind of hard to top. So I've been licensed just over a year. I've been starting to get into kind of building some homebrew projects. I have not quite as interesting a version of a microbitics as Don's, but next up I'm going to build a little QRP CW rig. I only have one problem, is I don't do CW. Before I'm building that, I'm using modern technology to build the auto keyer and an auto decoder on an Arduino microcontroller. So here's the whole. I'll hold it up. You can kind of see it, and then I'll show you how. Hopefully, show you how it's working. That's the little. It's just kind of a breadboard and a microcontroller. It's got an LED.
Use the microphone.
It's got an LED, it's got an LCD, and it's got a buzzer. Okay, so who decoded it?
Me. It was your call sign. You need more space between the letters.
Need more space between the letters. See, so I'm debugging right now. So anyway, very good. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Dean, you'll make a great CW op. Dean, by the way, is another one of our new regulars on the powwow net. So good show, Dean. All right, next up. Looks like more navigational instruments.
Joe, KN4JVV. I brought 3 sextants. They're all different. I've successfully used one, marginally successfully used a second, and I don't know how to use the third. It works on a somewhat different principle. It's a bubble sextant before GPS, before Loran. To find Hawaii, you had to take sunshots. You had to do celestial navigation between North America and someplace out in the boonies, islands, which Fred Noonan did not do very successfully. He was the navigator for Amelia Earhart. The interesting, this is, I always thought, and still kind of do, this is the one I used marginally successfully. It's a fully functional sextant. I thought it was just some sort of demo gizmo that the company made to demonstrate their ability. I saw one this one's dated 1911 on the case, some British company, which we can read off the back. I was recently in Alabama. I went to the State History Museum in Montgomery, and there was one exactly like it that museum claims was carried by a noble soldier of the Confederacy in the war between the states. There are 3 words you will never see south of here: civil war and slavery in any public forum. Anyhow, so I have my doubts that story's true, but you know all you need to know. I did not restore this. I met a guy once who used to work at Silver Hill, which the correct name for that is, anybody know? That's where the Smithsonian restores aircraft. Garber, thank you. And he said, no, don't restore stuff. It's more valuable historically if you don't. So they look like crap, but they work.
Okay, is this somebody's project? Oh, I'll do those after. John.
John, K4YMA. I'm
maybe sort of out of order if somebody's got something over here. But this is just a timer that I used 20 years ago when I first started my home business, and I used it for billing hours. This is a notebook from 7 years ago. We've been putting up the spider beam at Field Day for about a decade now, and I suppose everybody has seen the picture on our front page on the website of us having that up in the air, but most people don't get a chance to see the parts of it or how it's put together or any of the documentation for it. And I've got all that right here. There's some, went and, are you hearing me? Can you still hear me? Okay. Sure. I did a survey because I'm making some modifications and we may have to do some repairs on it. It's getting pretty worn. Some of the parts are not perfectly manufactured in the first place, and so I took some survey pictures, and I'm going to talk with the engineers who made the antenna in the first place. But these are some nice close-ups of the parts, and some of them are kind of pretty. And I've also got some records from a few years back when I was first figuring out how to assemble it, and you can take a look at the binder. Thank you.
Hey, John, thanks. Well, we're down to my stuff, and I feel very humble after seeing all this high-tech stuff. Very nice work done. What I have to show is part of my collection of keyer paddles, and so I have what I think is a nice selection of them. Of course, I have the bencher. The bencher is the one that I recommend for all new CW operators who want to learn how to use an electronic keyer. It really is a good one. And I have another one that was manufactured by some fellow out in the Shenandoah Valley. It's a really, really good keyer, but I've never seen another one like it. This one was made by an Elmer from my high school days down in Texas. It's a knockoff on the bencher that he made a couple of improvements on. He was a machinist for the Air Force in World War II, a master machinist, so his work is just beautiful. And so this is a fun keyer to use also. This one was is a Nike. It's a very early paddle, and I acquired it in the 70s. And when I did, I asked a shop that I knew of to make one very similar to it. I gave them the drawings for it, and this is the one that was done for me. This was my first paddle, and amazingly, it worked then and still works. You all are familiar with K4XY. It's the call sign we use when our club goes on the air. Well, this was K4XY's paddle. His name was Bernie Stucker. Who here remembers Bernie? Bernie was a heck of a good guy. He was a big CW guy, and when the club auctioned off his estate, this is what I wanted. So I've got his paddle. I have a little one that I keep with my FT817, my QRP rig, in keeping with a small radio, a small paddle. And then this critter is a Japanese thing called a high mound, and I think it was a giveaway at some hamfest. My brother-in-law sent it to me. It's actually a pretty good little paddle. It's all plastic. Well, that's what I brought sports fans. When you get to be really into CW, you'll have your own collection of paddles. All right. Can we hold questions until the end, please? Oh, well, one last edition. Absolutely. Step on up here, sir. Yes, absolutely. At the behest of my wife, I've been going through junk in our garage and basement, etc., and I just wanted to point out the value of never getting rid of anything. Life is full of serendipitous events. Recently, I was doing some genealogical research, and I ran across a family tree, and it was owned by now I've realized, a cousin I hadn't seen in 50 years, and I managed to get in touch with him. That one thing led to another, etc., and we got together with some other cousins that were moving to Florida, and then we all had breakfast. What the heck has that got to do with amateur radio? As I was going through these boxes, I was throwing stuff aside, some to look at later and some to throw away right now. One of the things I put aside to look at later was a package, an envelope with a whole bunch of old QSL cards. Some of you may know that, probably more than you care to remember, that I got licensed originally in 1959 at the age of 13. It was at the behest of two brothers that I was in junior high school with, Alan and Dusty Matthews, and I had never had any contact with them past junior high school because they moved and went to a different high school. But lo and behold, as I was going through this packet of QSL cards, I ran across one, which was my old QSL card, which I had scratched off the N from KN1NME because I was a young teenager and I didn't have money to go buy new QSL cards. But way at the bottom of the package of QSL cards, I ran across one, and I just looked at the call sign and I said, KN1LTJ. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, Norwalk, Connecticut, that's my town. At the bottom in small letters it says Alan Matthews. So in June 5th, 1959, he and I had a QSL card. Well, I said, wait a minute, what's the possibility? So I get on the computer and go to QRZ. He's still alive and kicking. He's K1LTJ, and according to his bio, he was up in Connecticut, and he had an antenna farm that would have put that guy in Maryland give him a run for his money, 60-foot towers and all the rest of that stuff. And I said, boy, he's really been into it. He moved to Florida. As of tomorrow morning, I'm going to give him a call, and we're going to get back together again. So never throw anything away.
Point of order, Mike.
Okay. All right. One more. I'm going to invite Lynn. To give her little show at this point. And so, JSEC, are you in with this? Okay, good. Miss Lynn?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's that. And there may be sound. There may be sound in a second. There. This is a time-lapse film of QRP to the field back in April that I finally finished yesterday.
Excellent. The only thing we missed was Steve cooking hot dogs. All right, JSEC.